The wedding was meant to be the highlight of the year for the prestigious Donovan family. Judge Charles Donovan, a man revered in the affluent circles of Richmond, Virginia, was proudly set to watch his only son, Peter, marry the enchanting Emma Carlisle. The venue was breathtaking, a sprawling estate adorned with cascading white roses and a backdrop of grandeur befitting a family of power and influence. But behind the scenes of this picture-perfect event lay a web of deceit that would culminate in unimaginable tragedy. Unbeknownst to the guests, secrets had been festering for years, secrets that, if revealed, could destroy the Donovan legacy. By the end of the day, a life would be lost, and the Donovan family's pristine facade would crumble. What could have driven such chaos? How far would one go to protect their darkest secrets? Stay tuned as we unravel this gripping tale of betrayal, obsession, and murder. Don't forget to subscribe for more shocking stories that challenge everything you think you know about loyalty and trust. To the world, the Donovan family seemed untouchable, a shining example of success and stability. Judge Charles Donovan, a towering figure in Richmond, Virginia, had spent decades building his reputation as a man of fairness and intellect. His courtroom rulings were celebrated, and his presence commanded respect at every gala, fundraiser, and town hall meeting. Married to his college sweetheart, Margaret, Charles had created a life that seemed as perfect as the sprawling colonial-style mansion they called home. Margaret Donovan embodied grace and poise. A dedicated wife and mother, she had supported Charles through his ascent to prominence while raising their only child, Peter. She was a fixture in the community, chairing charity boards and hosting elegant soirees that often ended with guests marveling at how she managed it all. Beneath her calm demeanor, Margaret's devotion to her family was unshakable, a devotion that would be tested in unimaginable ways. Peter Donovan, the golden boy of Richmond, had grown into a man his parents could be proud of. A rising star in the tech industry, he carried the charm of his father and the compassion of his mother. His engagement to Emma Carlisle was celebrated as the union of two of Richmond's most respected families. Emma, a recent law school graduate with a bright future, had captivated Peter with her intelligence and warmth. Their relationship appeared to be a fairy tale come to life. Emma Carlisle was a woman who could light up a room. Raised in a modest household, her hard-working spirit and ambition had earned her a place at one of the most prestigious law schools in the country. Meeting Peter had felt like destiny. The Donovans welcomed her with open arms, and Margaret, in particular, took a liking to Emma's wit and drive. It wasn't long before Emma became a beloved addition to their circle. The wedding was planned to perfection, a grand celebration that promised to cement the Donovan family's legacy. The invitations were embossed with gold foil, the guest list included Richmond's elite, and the details were carefully curated to ensure a flawless event. Margaret spent weeks overseeing every element, from the menu to the flower arrangements, determined to make the day unforgettable, but not all was as it seemed. Beneath Charles's composed exterior, a secret gnawed at him, one that threatened to destroy the life he had built. Emma, the soon-to-be daughter-in-law everyone adored, wasn't just Peter's fiancée. She was also the woman Charles had secretly loved and wronged. As the wedding approached, Charles found it harder to hide his unease. His interactions with Emma lingered just a second too long. His glances held something more than fatherly affection, and Margaret, ever intuitive, began to notice the cracks in their perfect world. But she said nothing, convincing herself it was just her imagination. Unbeknownst to everyone, Charles's secret was closer to being exposed than he realized. The perfect family facade was on the verge of collapse, and the lavish wedding would become the stage for a shocking and deadly revelation. The story of Charles Donovan and Emma Carlisle didn't begin in the glow of Peter's engagement. It started a year earlier, on an unremarkable autumn evening when Peter introduced Emma to his parents. The dinner was meant to be a casual family affair, a chance for Charles and Margaret to meet the woman their son had fallen for. But for Charles, It became the beginning of a dangerous obsession. Emma's presence that evening was magnetic. She spoke with a confidence and intelligence that immediately caught Charles's attention. Her smile, her laughter, it lingered in his mind long after she and Peter had left. At first, Charles dismissed the feelings as harmless admiration, but as weeks passed, he found himself making excuses to be around her more often. He offered to help Peter mentor her in her burgeoning legal career, inviting her to lunch meetings under the guise of professional guidance. Emma, for her part, saw Charles as a source of wisdom. She respected his legal acumen and appreciated the opportunities he presented. But somewhere along the line, their relationship shifted. What started as innocent mentorship grew complicated. Charles's compliments became personal. His gestures became more intimate. And Emma, caught between her gratitude and confusion, didn't push him away. Perhaps it was Charles's confidence, or maybe it was the thrill of a forbidden connection, but she didn't stop him when he crossed the line. One night, during one of their mentorship dinners, Charles kissed her. Emma was stunned but didn't pull away. That kiss marked the start of an affair that would remain their carefully guarded secret. It wasn't long before their liaison took a turn Charles hadn't anticipated. Emma discovered she was pregnant. Panic consumed her. This wasn't part of the plan. How could she possibly explain this to Peter, to the Donovans, to anyone? Charles, always calculating, proposed a solution. Emma would take a legal advocacy contract abroad, specifically a UNICEF project in Africa, for 18 months. The project would be prestigious enough to align with her career aspirations and provide a perfect explanation for her extended absence. Charles reassured Peter by suggesting they postpone the wedding until her return, emphasizing how proud he was of Emma's commitment to meaningful work. In reality, Emma traveled to her mother's home in another state, where she quietly gave birth to a baby girl. Her mother took on the role of primary caregiver, shielding the child from scrutiny. During her absence, Charles ensured Emma maintained regular communication with Peter through media chats and other means that wouldn't reveal her presence in the country. Meanwhile, Emma's guilt deepened with every passing day. After about a year and few months, Emma was back in town. The closer the wedding day drew, the harder it became to keep the secret buried. Peter, though not openly suspicious, began noticing inconsistencies in Emma's behavior since her return. She seemed distracted during their conversations, distant during moments that should have been joyful. Her smiles felt forced, and her laughter carried a note of nervousness. Peter's concern grew when he overheard a hushed phone call between Emma and her mother, something about arrangements and keeping things quiet. Charles, too, felt the walls closing in. His once steady hand in court now trembled at his desk. He became increasingly irritable at home, snapping at Margaret for minor inconveniences. The composed judge, known for his poise under pressure, was cracking under the weight of his lies. But the greatest threat came not from Margaret or Peter, but from Emma herself. As the wedding loomed, she began to question her choices. The life she was building with Peter felt increasingly fragile, built on a foundation of secrets and betrayal. She couldn't shake the feeling that the truth would come out, whether by her hand or someone else's. With the wedding day approaching, the fragile web of deceit Charles and Emma had spun was unraveling faster than either could control. The question wasn't if the truth would surface, but when, and who would bear the consequences. A week before the wedding, Peter visited Emma's mother's home in Fredericksburg to drop off some documents Emma had asked him to deliver. Her mother, an older woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, seemed oddly flustered when Peter arrived. She thanked him and hurriedly tried to usher him out the door, but a faint cry from another room stopped him in his tracks. "A baby?" Peter asked, confused. Emma had never mentioned a sibling, let alone an infant niece or nephew. He couldn't resist his curiosity and stepped inside the room. There, in a bassinet, was a baby girl with strikingly familiar features. Peter felt a strange pang of recognition as he stared at the child, but he couldn't place it. When Emma's mother returned, her nervousness was palpable. "It's complicated," she said vaguely, avoiding his questions, but her hesitance only made Peter more determined. "Whose baby is this?" he pressed, his tone firmer now. Her answer came reluctantly, and it shattered him. "She's Emma's daughter." The revelation hit Peter like a freight train. His fiancée had a child, a secret she had hidden from him for over a year. But as his shock turned to anger, more pieces of the puzzle began to surface in his mind. He thought about Emma's supposed legal advocacy contract with UNICEF in Africa, her distracted behavior in recent weeks, and his father's uncharacteristically attentive interest in her. The pieces clicked together with terrifying clarity. Unable to shake the suspicion gnawing at him, Peter did something he had never done before. He accessed his father's private text messages. As the son of a prominent judge, Peter had long been aware of his father's hidden network of favors and connections. Using a password he had memorized years ago, he unlocked the encrypted app Charles used for discreet conversations. What he found confirmed his worst fears. The messages between his father and Emma were intimate, damning. One exchange read, "Charles, I'll take care of the arrangements. Just keep quiet until after the wedding." Emma, "I can't keep lying to him. It's killing me." Charles, "If you tell him, you'll ruin everything for all of us." Peter's hands trembled as he read the messages. His fiancée wasn't just hiding a child. She was hiding an affair with his own father. Peter's first instinct was to confront them both immediately, but he stopped himself. A confrontation would only lead to more lies, more manipulation. Instead, he decided to wait, to play along until the perfect moment to strike. He attended wedding rehearsals, posed for photos, and smiled through gritted teeth, all while his anger simmered beneath the surface. In private, he began plotting. Peter wasn't a violent man, but the depth of the betrayal consumed him. He imagined countless ways to expose them, some public, some devastatingly personal. The wedding, he decided, would be the stage for his revenge. His mother, Margaret, noticed the change in his demeanor. "Are you feeling all right?" she asked one evening. Peter forced a reassuring smile. "Just the usual pre-wedding nerves," he replied, knowing full well that his nervousness had nothing to do with the ceremony and everything to do with what he planned to reveal. As the wedding day drew closer, Peter's interactions with Charles and Emma became charged with an undercurrent of tension. Charles, oblivious to Peter's discovery, continued to act as though he were in control. Emma, on the other hand, seemed increasingly distracted and anxious, as though sensing that something was about to go horribly wrong. Peter's cold politeness toward his father didn't go unnoticed. "You've been distant lately," Charles remarked during a family dinner. "Is something bothering you?" Peter only smiled. "Not at all. I'm just looking forward to the big day." That night, as Peter stared at his reflection in the mirror, he whispered to himself, "They won't see it coming." The wedding day arrived with the kind of perfection that made it seem like fate had blessed the occasion. The sun shone brightly over the sprawling Donovan estate, its meticulously manicured gardens adorned with cascading white roses and strings of fairy lights. Guests, dressed in their finest attire, mingled on the lawn, sipping champagne and exchanging compliments about the event's grandeur. To all appearances, it was a day of joy and celebration. But for Peter Donovan, it was the culmination of a week of simmering betrayal. His fiancée, Emma Carlyle, radiated beauty and grace in her wedding gown, but to Peter, her every smile felt like a lie. His father, Judge Charles Donovan, stood near the altar, exuding his usual air of authority. Only Peter knew the truth that would soon shatter the perfect illusion. Peter played his role flawlessly. As he greeted guests and posed for photos, no one could have guessed the storm brewing within him. His mother, Margaret, watched him with pride, completely unaware of the secret weighing him down. Charles, too, appeared calm and composed, confident that his carefully constructed facade was intact. Emma, however, seemed jittery. She avoided Peter's gaze and clutched her bouquet tightly, as though it were the only thing grounding her. The ceremony began with a string quartet, playing a soft, romantic melody. As Emma walked down the aisle on the arm of her mother, guests marveled at her beauty, unaware of the turmoil hidden behind her poised exterior. Peter's heart pounded in his chest, but not with love or anticipation. It was the adrenaline of knowing what he was about to unleash. The vows began without incident, each word rehearsed and delivered with precision. But as the officiant asked for any objections, a heavy silence fell over the crowd. Peter glanced at his father, whose expression betrayed a flicker of anxiety. Peter hesitated, savoring the moment. Then he stepped forward. "I have something to say," Peter announced, his voice steady but loud enough to command attention. Gasps rippled through the audience, and Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. Emma froze, her eyes wide with panic. "This isn't just a wedding," Peter continued, his gaze fixed on his father. "This is the culmination of lies, betrayal and secrets that have been hidden for far too long." The crowd murmured in confusion. Charles stiffened, his composure slipping as Peter turned to face him fully. "How long did you think you could get away with it, Dad?" Peter asked, his voice dripping with disdain. "How long did you think you could keep your affair with Emma hidden?" The silence that followed was deafening. Margaret's face turned ashen, her hands trembling as she processed her son's words. Emma dropped her bouquet, her shoulders slumping under the weight of the revelation. Charles opened his mouth to speak, but found no words to defend himself. "And that's not all," Peter continued, his voice rising. "They have a child together, a child they've been hiding from all of us. The woman I was supposed to marry, the father I was supposed to trust. They've both betrayed me." The crowd exploded into a frenzy of shocked whispers and exclamations. Guests exchanged horrified glances, some rising from their seats in disbelief. Margaret stumbled backward, clutching a nearby chair for support. "Is this true?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Charles finally found his voice, his tone defensive. "Peter, you don't understand." "No, I understand perfectly," Peter snapped, cutting him off. "You're a liar and a coward." Emma broke into sobs, her tears streaking her makeup. "I'm sorry," she cried. "I never meant for any of this to happen." Margaret's grief turned to anger. "How could you?" she demanded, glaring at Charles. "How could you do this to our family?" The scene descended into chaos as guests tried to make sense of the shocking revelation. Some reached for their phones, recording the spectacle, while others attempted to calm the situation. But amidst the pandemonium, one thing became painfully clear. This wasn't over. In the heat of the moment, emotions boiled over. Charles stepped toward Peter, his voice rising. "You had no right to do this here, to humiliate me like this." Peter, his composure finally cracking, shouted back, "You destroyed this family. You don't deserve my respect, and you don't deserve forgiveness." Before anyone could react, Margaret lunged forward. In a single shocking moment, she grabbed the ceremonial knife from the nearby cake table and plunged it into Charles's chest. Gasps erupted from the crowd as Charles stumbled backward, clutching the wound. Blood seeped through his shirt as he collapsed to the ground. Margaret stood frozen, the knife still in her hand, her face a mask of disbelief and rage. "You ruined everything," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You ruined all of us." As Charles's lifeless body lay sprawled on the aisle, the congregation erupted into further chaos. Some rushed to call 911, while others fled the scene in horror. Margaret dropped the knife, collapsing to her knees beside her husband's body, sobbing uncontrollably. Peter stood motionless, his plan to expose the truth having spiraled into a nightmare he hadn't anticipated. Emma, paralyzed by shock, watched as the man she thought she loved and the family she admired disintegrated before her eyes. The wedding was over, but the aftermath of that day would haunt them all forever. The aftermath of the shocking murder at the Donovan wedding transformed the once celebrated family into the center of a national scandal. The estate, adorned with remnants of the ill-fated ceremony, was now cordoned off with police tape. Detectives, forensic teams, and reporters descended on the scene, piecing together the events that led to the public slaying of Judge Charles Donovan. Detectives James Trump and Joshua Jefferson, seasoned investigators from the Richmond Police Department, were assigned to the case. The scene that greeted them was one of chaos. Stunned wedding guests gathered outside, some weeping, others clamoring to provide their version of what had happened. Inside the grand hall, Charles's body remained sprawled on the aisle, blood pooling beneath him as crime scene photographers documented every angle. Detectives began their investigation with the most obvious suspect, Margaret Donovan. She had confessed on the spot, surrendering to officers as soon as they arrived. "I didn't plan to do it," she murmured, still clutching her blood-streaked hands. I couldn't let him get away with it." During her initial interrogation, Margaret recounted the events that led to her shocking act. "Everything I believed in, everything I built my life around was a lie," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of grief and anger. "Charles betrayed me, betrayed us all. I wasn't thinking. I just acted." Her emotional breakdown lent credibility to her claim of a crime of passion, but Trump wasn't convinced. "There's more to this than what she's saying," she told Jefferson later. "This wasn't just about the affair. This family is hiding layers of secrets." The detectives moved on to the wedding guests, whose accounts painted a picture of a family unraveling under the weight of betrayal. Many described the confrontation between Peter and Charles, emphasizing the intensity of their argument and the palpable tension between father and son. "You could feel the hatred in the room," one guest said. "It was like a dam was about to burst." Emma Carlisle, however, was noticeably absent from the interviews. Witnesses claimed she fled the scene shortly after the murder, her white gown trailing behind her as she disappeared into the estate's wooded grounds. The detectives issued an alert to locate her, suspecting she might hold key information about the events leading to the murder. As Trump and Jefferson delved deeper, they uncovered a trail of lies and deceit that stretched far beyond the affair. Financial records revealed that Charles had been siphoning money from the family's estate for years, funding lavish gifts and payments to Emma's mother to keep their child's existence a secret. "This wasn't just an affair," Jefferson remarked. "He was building a whole second life." Further investigation into Charles's phone records exposed encrypted conversations between him and Emma that hinted at plans to move their child out of state before the wedding. He was preparing for the fallout, Trump concluded. He must have known the truth would come out eventually. Peter's role in the confrontation also came under scrutiny. While many guests described him as the aggrieved party, text messages from his phone revealed his meticulous planning in the lead-up to the wedding. "I'm going to make sure everyone knows," he had written to a close friend. "He's not walking away from this unscathed." Though Peter's messages revealed his intent to expose the affair, detectives noted he had not anticipated the violent outcome. He wanted justice, not murder, Jefferson surmised. Still, his actions had undeniably set the stage for the tragedy. Emma was located 2 days later, hiding in a modest motel on the outskirts of Richmond. When brought in for questioning, she appeared distraught but cooperative. Her eyes were red from crying, and her voice trembled as she spoke. "I didn't know Margaret would do that," she said through tears. I thought Charles would talk his way out of it, like he always does." Emma's account provided crucial details about her relationship with Charles, confirming the affair and the existence of their child. She explained that Charles had pressured her to proceed with the wedding, despite her growing reservations. "He said it was the only way to protect our secret," she confessed, her voice breaking. "But I was falling apart. I wanted to tell Peter the truth, but Charles wouldn't let me. He said it would destroy us all." Her testimony painted a grim picture of Charles as a manipulative figure who used his influence and authority to control those around him. Emma described how he had coerced her into keeping the pregnancy and child a secret, arranging for her mother to care for the baby under the guise of a fabricated international legal project. "He made me feel like I didn't have a choice," she said. Everything he did was to protect himself. As the investigation progressed, the detectives unraveled a complex web of motives. Margaret's crime of passion seemed straightforward on the surface, but the toxic dynamics within the family revealed deeper culpability. Peter's dramatic revelation of the affair and child had undeniably provoked the confrontation, but questions lingered about his intentions. Did he foresee the chaos it would unleash? And what role did Emma's wavering loyalty play in escalating the tensions? Detectives Trump and Jefferson faced the daunting task of piecing together the fractured relationships at the core of the tragedy. "This isn't just one crime," Jefferson remarked. "It's a perfect storm of deceit, manipulation, and heartbreak." The Richmond Police Department wasted no time in filing charges. The murder of Judge Charles Donovan had gripped the nation, transforming a respected family into the centerpiece of a sordid scandal. Margaret Donovan, who had confessed on the spot, was the first to face formal charges. Her admission of guilt and the overwhelming evidence at the scene left no ambiguity. She was charged with second-degree murder, as investigators determined her actions were unplanned but deliberate, fueled by raw emotion. At her arraignment, Margaret appeared composed but deeply shaken. Her defense attorney, Raymond Stones, argued that her actions were the result of years of emotional abuse and manipulation by Charles. Margaret Donovan acted in a moment of overwhelming pain, Cross told the court. Her life was built on trust and devotion to her family, and when that was shattered in the most public way imaginable, she reacted. Prosecutors, however, emphasized Margaret's conscious decision to use the ceremonial knife. "This was not an accident," Prosecutor Angela Perry stated. "Margaret made a deliberate choice to harm her husband. This was rage, plain and simple." Peter's involvement added another layer of complexity to the case. While he hadn't committed the murder, his decision to expose the affair in such a dramatic and public manner raised ethical questions. Detectives uncovered messages on Peter's phone that revealed his calculated plan to confront his father and fiancée at the wedding. "I'm going to make sure everyone knows," one message read. "He's not walking away from this unscathed." Ultimately, Peter was not charged with any crime, as his actions, while provocative, did not directly lead to Charles's death. However, the emotional toll of his actions was undeniable. Public opinion was sharply divided. Some viewed Peter as a victim of his father's betrayal, while others blamed him for setting the tragic events into motion. Emma's capture and subsequent testimony played a pivotal role in exposing the truth. While she was not directly implicated in the murder, her affair with Charles and her complicity in hiding their child were central to the case. On the stand, Emma broke down, her voice trembling as she recounted the pressures she had faced. "I knew what I was doing was wrong," Emma admitted. "But Charles had a way of making you feel like you had no choice. He said telling the truth would ruin everything." Emma also revealed the extent of Charles's manipulation, including threats to cut off financial support for their child if she didn't comply with his plans. "He controlled every aspect of my life," she said tearfully. "I felt trapped." Although her cooperation shielded her from legal repercussions, Emma's reputation was irreparably damaged. She left Richmond shortly after the trial, disappearing from public life to escape the scrutiny and judgment of the community. Margaret Donovan's trial became a media spectacle, with every detail dissected by legal experts and the public alike. The courtroom was filled with tension as Prosecutor Perry delivered a scathing opening statement, framing Margaret's actions as deliberate and fueled by rage. This was not a moment of temporary insanity, Perry argued. Margaret made a conscious decision to end her husband's life. The defense countered with a compelling narrative of emotional distress. Raymond Cross introduced testimony from a psychologist who diagnosed Margaret with acute stress disorder. Margaret's mental state was compromised, the psychologist explained. She was reacting to years of betrayal and emotional trauma. The jury ultimately found Margaret guilty of second-degree murder, sentencing her to 15 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 10. The sentence reflected an acknowledgement of her emotional state, but also underscored the gravity of her actions. The scandal left Richmond reeling. Once revered as a pillar of justice and morality, Charles Donovan's name became synonymous with hypocrisy and deceit. Margaret's trial further tarnished the family's reputation, turning the Donovans into a cautionary tale about the devastating consequences of unchecked ambition and betrayal. For Peter, Emma, and the rest of the community, the case served as a sobering reminder of how easily a perfect facade can crumble. The Donovan family's story, once a symbol of success, became a haunting example of the cost of lies and the fragility of trust. Margaret, once the embodiment of grace and poise, faced the harsh reality of life in prison. The transition from hosting elegant charity galas to surviving the monotony and challenges of incarceration was jarring. Yet, Margaret adjusted with quiet determination. She joined support groups for inmates struggling to reconcile their actions, using her time to reflect on the choices that had brought her to this point. Peter's letters became her lifeline. Despite his overwhelming guilt for exposing the truth, Peter wrote to her weekly, offering updates on his life and assurances of his love. "I wish I could turn back time," one letter read, "but I promise I'll make things right for us, somehow." For Peter, the events of the wedding day left an indelible mark. Once a rising star in the tech world, he now found himself grappling with a tarnished reputation and an overwhelming sense of purpose lost. He withdrew from public life, turning to therapy and finding solace in small acts of atonement. Peter began volunteering with organizations supporting victims of family trauma, channeling his pain into something meaningful. Emma's daughter, now her sole source of hope and regret, remained in her mother's care. For Emma, the child represented both a painful reminder of her choices and a reason to rebuild. Yet even her relationship with her mother, who had helped conceal the affair, grew strained under the weight of shared guilt. Richmond's elite, once eager to associate with the Donovans, now whispered their name only in cautionary tones. The scandal inspired debates about morality, power, and the consequences of ambition unchecked by integrity. Charles Donovan's legacy as a respected judge became a footnote in a story overshadowed by betrayal and deceit. Margaret's dramatic act of violence transformed her into a symbol of how even the most composed can be pushed to extremes. The case left the community grappling with broader questions. Could Charles's death have been prevented if his lies had come to light earlier? Were Margaret's actions an act of justice or desperation? And could Peter and Emma ever escape the shadow of the scandal that destroyed their lives? The Donovan family's fall from grace is a chilling reminder of how secrets, betrayal, and unchecked ambition can destroy even the strongest of foundations. What began as a picture-perfect family life unraveled into a nightmare of manipulation, shattered trust, and ultimately, murder. As we reflect on this tragic tale, haunting questions remain. How far would someone go to protect their secrets? What happens when the truth is more devastating than the lies it replaces? And in the pursuit of justice, can there ever truly be winners? If this story captivated you and left you questioning the fragility of trust, subscribe to True Crimes Corner for more gripping narratives. Share your thoughts in the comments. Was Margaret's act one of justice or desperation? Your insights help unravel the moral dilemmas behind these stories. Stay tuned for more tales of betrayal, obsession, and the shocking lengths people go to in the name of love, power, and survival.